Hi, Namaste, and welcome to SAS Network. This is a podcast by Patruni Chitanda Shastri. I am a drag artist from Hyderabad and a DEI professional. And in this podcast, I would be talking with some wonderful guests from the DEI spectrum about diversity, equity, and inclusion at workspace. Share your support. SAS Network is available in more than 10 plus podcasting channels and including social media channels like YouTube and Instagram. Do share these conversations with your colleagues, with your friends, with your partners, and let's create a momentum. So, why wait? Let's go ahead and bring in our next guest to the SAS Network. You are watching SAS Network. Hi everyone. My name is Patruni and I'm back with another episode. So I'm having a very wonderful guest with me, Praful, and I had the wonderful opportunity to kind of work with Praful in a project in Hyderabad, and I really know that organization who does some amazing work in tuning the ideas of DEI policies within corporate spaces, and I'm super excited to have this conversation. So welcome, Praful. Welcome. I'm super happy to have you as one of my guests. So let me quickly kind of jump into a very first question. That what brought you into the DEI work?
We did not even have the vocab. First of all, thanks for inviting me, having this conversation. What's happening recently is that people have changed the nomenclature, and DI now has gone more subliminal and behind the scenes, operating, pulling strings, making waves, but it's undercurrent. It's not really visible, right? So to have it visible is it's a statement in 2026, let me put it that way. Yeah, so thanks for doing that. Second, I didn't choose the DI life. We did not even have the vocab. I was working on ground for LGBT conversations in 2008 in Mumbai, in Pride. And when you work on Pride, you work with everybody across the spectrum, and there were at least 30-35 organizations that one ended up working with every year within that small ecosystem. Like Mumbai is not small, but let me call it that. That being the educational ground, I was working in marketing and communication at that point of time. For one of the biggest agencies, few of the biggest media houses, etc. So I was always involved in the corporate side of things, somehow helping them in comms, in storytelling, them making sense of how to engage with multiple stakeholders, be it customers, be it potential employees, be it investors, whatever. So I was doing that, right? So equity from the communication standpoint is something that I understood at that moment anyway. An attempt was always to include as many point of views and then those insights to be utilized well, and for that to reflect in success of those campaigns or those endeavors in whatever manner. Come 2014-15, which is 5-6 years into the Mumbai Pride operations, and the natural progression is you're like, hey, we have mounted something, it's going well. Now legality was not in sight, but we were working on it, whatever that we could do on ground. And the conversation then was, what next? What else can you do? And the idea for India's first LGBT business networking forum was something that I shared with few people who were part of that small Mumbai Pride conversations, because we had representation across identities. Even now, one of my business partners is gender fluid, but at work they are affirming to the masculine presenting side of their name. That's their choice in life. But that's how it is. I was introduced to the term by them. Pallav has acted in a movie presenting as feminine, this thing, playing somebody from the community. For me was the name of the movie, and somebody from the community only made it, who's a famous artist and all. So Pallav introduced few concepts to me, like life is too long to live as one gender. I was like, interesting thought. And then dwelling more on that, dwelling more on the equity of gender, dwelling more on what can I do specifically, what can the systems that I engage with do. So that was till a point of time, till 2019, where my organization, which was for networking, did a job fair called Vivid. And we didn't do it from the intersectionality and this thing, but we knew that we would like to reach out to as many people who are pushed to the margins or who may not even be marginal, because women form such a large working population, and but yet you know how the hiring as well as supplier diversity etc. in corporate spaces was even in 2019. So when we did this job fair, I was in touch with people like parents of candidates with motor disabilities, and a lot of such things that came my way. It was an eye opener for sure. We won an award much later for it. That was another benefit. But in 21 days, 9 companies and 9 big major companies showed interest. So when in 2020 that lockdown and pandemic happened, and I was almost 40, ready to learn again. I had that privilege in life. But a lot of people were knocking our doors saying that, hey, refer me to something. I need to pay for my next EMI. I need to get something for my rent or for just, gender formative care, etc. And that's when the actual pivot happened, because we formed the company officially. It was a social venture earlier. And I took that leap. I dedicated more time and no looking back after that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that is my
Thank you so much for sharing it. And also, I want to kind of get the name correctly. It's Egonomics, if I'm correct, right? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
Economics is a platform that we were creating for 6 degrees is hiring piece, but what has emerged over the years as much bigger and much more sustainable option is the training and employer branding and
Hmm.
designing campaigns.
Hmm.
So economics, we use it, though it
Hmm.
is not the primary identity. The
Hmm.
identity is 6 degrees because the company is 6 degrees. Economics was one of the verticals, one of the things that we still own, and
Hmm.
still it holds the key to what the change that is happening in the DI space currently, because the tagline way back in 2020 was equity to well-being. And that's what the nomenclature shift has been in the past
Yeah.
year. Everybody's gone to that.
Yeah. One thing which I was really kind of when I met you, and when I was a part of the training which we were giving to one of the corporate clients of yours
Hmm.
in Hyderabad, I think
Hmm.
you were one of the first people within the DEI spaces which I have worked on an external level, was the one who was using
Hmm.
constantly the idea of equity or talking about equity within when you are working on inclusion. And I really was
Hmm.
very kind of, and after that, after I caught up with you, after I heard a couple more,
Hmm.
companies which are again providing services to corporates,
Hmm.
deliberately kind of bring in the concept of equity. But I just wanted to
Hmm.
understand how that kind of came into light of, going ahead and actively putting equity first, because that helps in getting a chain of change within the marginalized communities like that of the LGBT community. What that how did the equity kind of thought of equity came into your work to kind of start with?
You know, as much as we live outside in, I like to believe I live inside out as well, right? There is that whole side. And as far as getting vocab for our own journey, our own navigation, that's where it generally starts. So generally it was like, hey, where am I on the spectrum exactly? Right? And that includes the disability piece of my own identity, because my family has a autism spectrum thing running through most of us. For some of us, it's passive. At some years, it becomes active, and it's a very different conversation. But it manifests as ADHD in me. So it's ADHD technically, because I'm ADHD but on autism spectrum. So it is a stretch from one side to another. So when that was happening, when I was getting vocab for my condition and being high performing, that means high masking, and I hate those words, but they are operative in whatever manner. But my bit is the disability and sexuality were very close. All sexuality conversation is gender conversation. So now what's remaining? Socioeconomic class, few other markers, and blah 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 as far as equity is concerned. Because I was navigating my journey on three of these things, rest of it was a lot of observation that went in. A lot of like privilege of company that I have, because in Mumbai Pride, one of the years we had 20,000 people walk, right? So if 20,000 people are walking behind the scenes, I would have worked with 500 to 600 people across the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Which is for maybe one of the March events, but smaller events, etc., we would have worked with 3,000 people at least
Hmm.
to do that whole month-long celebration, and in various capacities because I was helping in communication. So you have to first digest, process it, and then put it out there in the world. I can't not make sense of it and just send it because Gen AI was not really there, and even now I don't like to use AI in
Yeah.
that manner. So I had a lot of privilege to be sitting on those tables, breaking bread, just having human experiences with so many people across those years that denying those social truths was difficult. So equity came from the space of a deep knowing that all of us start very differently. Our beginning points are different. So if there's reasonable accommodation that is systemic as well, if there is a conversation around it, it's not about opinion, but at least for me to know what is my truth there. And then if somebody else's truth is different from me, how to engage with that. And do I have real basis or do I have just the hearsay and just, small little stuff to work around it? So it went from being able to say that, hey, I have interest in something like this to maybe reading one page of Kanchalaya on Monday, right? But for people who think reading that or me talking about Kabir in Hindi and that being something that is not suitable for somebody of my background, XYZ and blah, is funny to me. And I can still give it back to them saying that, listen, if there is such great work and you're still processing it from a lens that is so programmed, you are being excluded from something so big. You're excluding yourself in a system. So equity again there, so a lot of those equitability conversations happened. A lot of equity, as in Listeners Collective has a tool called Wheel of Power and Powerlessness. Right? There are a bunch of scholars who plotted it, and internationally, I think, and Ducksworth, if I'm not sure of the name, one of these scholars who visualized the Wheel of Power and Powerless International one, Listeners Collective made it in India. And I use that in the training rooms, in rooms which are warmer to learn socioeconomic dynamics, right? Along with all of these. And as much as I spoke to these participants and people, till I think 500, 800 of them happened, I was like, okay, as soon as the number hit 2000 and above, the perspective shifted and then some more and then some more and it just kept building and I'm glad I'm continuing that journey because even now it's not fully concluded, but every day one gets to see something from the margin, from inside, something from privilege, something from disadvantage, something that's mix of both. You see that every day. You can't have a basic one liner. You have to have nuanced perspective. So equity is that. It gives me a lot of that.
Great. Thank you so much for adding this. Now I'm kind of coming to a very kind of a core question, especially at this age and day, especially when a T person is running national superpowers on the other side with a nuclear weapon on his hand. T as in Trump, I mean. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
at this point of time, like, the entire world of DEI, because I have seen a lot of companies or corporates are kind of, as you have also pointed it out, are muffling those words. So for this age, kind of for this age which we are kind of living in, can you tell me how hard it is to at least thrive the conversation of DEI and take it as something to the table and ask people, especially as you work as an external agency working with multiple multinational companies, how hard is it is to kind of convince and ensure that they apply it. And I think how the movement has changed in the past 2 to 3 years, and how do you think we as a individuals who are working in the DI space need to constantly reinvent ourselves in ensuring that we are continuing our work?
So I say this in a lot of spaces. As a DI person, our job is to listen and then listen some more and listen. And our job is to listen. And our job is to listen, it's also to learn from that. Almost 1.5, 2 years before the whole thing kind of came to a grinding halt and it was made the scapegoat, it was made,
Hmm.
the hangman in the system. You see how violent communication systems have been functioning and the results of it across the globe,
Hmm.
especially in ecosystems that don't have that stability. Yeah. Around us, so
Hmm.
many countries around India, each of them
Hmm.
collapsing in so many ways because the Overton window between what's radical and what is conservative, constantly shifting. There always will be this push and pull. Yeah. And change will come in waves. You'll have to process the grief that is associated, heal and be ready for the next phase. That's how one approaches overall thing. Because if you are a network weaver, if you are a person who is keep so between hunter-gatherer and farmers, that is the difference. Corporate act like hunter-gatherers. When there's opportunity, they'll strike, they will gather the benefits of it, and they will be out of that space because it's not for them to nurture. So whatever communities that we are talking overall, or whatever the spaces that we are talking, it's not for corporate and it's not for governance, it's not for stakeholders to nurture. It's for people to nurture. So I look at it as a human. I don't look at it as a consultant. I don't look at it as a person of XYZ identity. That's futile. If I look at it as a queer person, I'll always have vested interest. I'll always be angry. I'll always be XYZ. I'll always think it's unfair. No matter what is done, I'll still look at lack. That's just the nature of wearing that lens and looking at things, because it just won't be enough. Because systemically, if I look, I will try to go right from witch hunt till today and try to do rights all those wrongs. Not physically possible. That's not feasible, right? It'll also rob me of something that is productive. Okay, that's one thing. If I look at what my role in as a person who has got a decision maker's best interest as well as trust as well as yours is concerned, my role is to say a company, an organization that is solid and that's a good business will outlive any government. My partnership has to reflect that. My vision has to reflect that. If I don't have patience enough to see the tide turn, then I don't have patience enough. Then I am not in sync with what that organization's cultural ebb and flow is. Some things are a business priority on some cycles, some things are not. So what DI pushback did was largely take away from the queer movement and put it back into women and disability buckets. And when that happened, I was one of the few lucky ones because I had never looked at myself as one-dimensional. And I had never positioned our company as one-dimensional. I was never rainbow washing or pink washing and saying that. And I was not using those company logos and earning my cred from that. It was our curation. Last year, in middle of all of this, one of our projects went to Cannes. It didn't get shortlisted, but it's called Bill of Pride, and it's still asking organizations for accountability. And it went to Cannes as an India entry officially. Now, is that something that I could plan and do? No, because we are the outliers, because we were still authentic, we were still doing our efforts, that instead of getting corporate recognition, we got platform recognition of such a kind, right? By the time the things turned, my disability work started showing bigger, and people said that let's take a queer person and go. So like the lens, even like last year around this time, biggest thing in my books was I was invited to Rashtrapati Bhavan for Republic Day dinner as a person who's speaking on autism and ADHD. And that as a conversational space, being queer is even bigger, right? So I didn't go as a person who's not out. I went as a person who's out. I still met everybody. I still interacted with everybody being an out person. I have not hidden anything, right? 22 amazing professionals with disabilities, some para-athletes, everybody was there with us. In the morning, we went for Republic Day parade because somebody very innocently asked, can we see Republic Day parade? And the system made space for us as people with disability and with children who are from our institute. And we went there, and it was amazing just to be part of the cultural diversity of this country. And we could see that up close and experience that and bring that back and say that, hey, there's not a single way of keeping things relevant. So even to corporate, when I go and I say, okay, where do you want to go? What is your 1,000-day plan? What is your 100-day plan? And what is your 10,000-day plan? 10,000-day plan, nobody has. Nobody has a 10,000-day plan.
I think it's too many numbers today.
It's too many number for anybody. Business is not so stable. So when they come back and they say, hey, this is my priority, I'm like, let's optimize and reach out to at least somebody within that 85%, 90% population that's not getting foot in the door. Or if we have foot in the door, who can we get in? We can get women returning to work program solidified just because you've taken the support off from queer this thing. Let's do that. I'll double down on that. Okay. That was the appetite. We did that quarter. Now it's become an annual IP and now we are doing it. Okay. Good. Great. We've got one quarter sorted for this one team. It runs without me. It runs with only ERG. I have no problem. I'm all right with that impact. I will not say that, okay, next time you didn't call me. All right. Are you all continuing it? Like one of the organizations I trained for 3.5, 4 years, they have been winning such amazing awards, and they are about 70% women who run this. This is a communication agency, but they are one of the best in India. And the kind of dedication to DI conversation that they have shown for last 5 years, and they were my first what to say team to work like for deep work, and I'm proud. And globally they're going and showing what they have learned, and I'm proud every time they show up in a manner, and they've won some 6-8 awards across and stuff, and I don't have count, they do, but they're doing fabulous. I am so happy. And even if the language has changed, even if things are deep dive, they've come at times, but 3 years out of 5 I could train them hands on, and right till the councils, right till everything. And it was not about one single thing. Sometimes it was within India, geographic differences, cultural differences between mainstream and, people from states that are at the periphery of India. Something as basic as that was something that we could step in, look at, see how culturally that thing is being misinterpreted, or some leak is there somewhere, and here this XYZ socioeconomic dynamic or XYZ generational dynamic is playing. We are there. And I'm so glad that that nuance is something that we are working on. Even right now, we'll work on 4th year for Lollapalooza, right? But the team doesn't believe in just lip service and just having us as inclusivity partner. On stage, you'll find people who represent more than one kind of diversity, for sure. I'm glad to be working with people like that.
One of the things which you have pointed out very well, and I think that is the learning for me, is we should never, because I work in an ERG at this point in time, and I put my queer identity with the lens, and I would always be dissatisfied because there's this constant question of okay, what, why, and all that stuff. But then we kind of take a step back from just that identity and look at it in a very holistic way. It gives a different kind of a joy, or the kind of work which we kind of do on a holistic way, kind of reinstills the thought that there's always a hope, and also makes us less crybaby, if I could say. So I really like that point of view of where you asked me to kind of see it in a more holistic. It's not just one identity, but a chain of identities which can work. And it's always this balance of time which makes things right. It's such a wonderful note which you have mentioned in the previous comment. And I think from there, I want to kind of come back to a question to kind of ask you, what is that one joy you kind of get as a person who's working in the DEI field? And are there any kind of things which you are manifesting to change in this particular landscape, especially if it comes to a country like India, which is very culturally as well as holistically diverse? What is that one manifestation which you think should be the new future of DEI in countries like India? I just want to know about those aspects.
Give you one memory from the project that we did together, because this hyphenated identity that you're talking about, I've seen you as a queer Hyderabadi who is singing baul songs, who's doing Dakhini stuff, and it's so much joy in the room. Why? Because you have not rooted it in identity. And when I would meet somebody, and if I have mentioned Gully Chinnery, etc., there is that connect, because you've got the person's pulse. What I wish and what I am seeing emerge, what's emerging is, while we are changing the nomenclature, there is also a very clear cognizance, very clear awareness that the power of diversity that makes the compound interest that we call as inclusion, right? The act, empathy in action, is because we have so much of diversity available, we can choose as well. It's never going to finish as a task. It's never going to finish at the task, because there'll be somebody else to let in the door, somebody else to address, somebody else. So I think of it as a endless. Have you seen a pangat, a kind of a meal table where you have those leaves and somebody serving food, and then there's somebody waiting, and then there's somebody waiting, and then you're still serving. The idea is to have as many people seated quickly, and then rotate people on table. So I see things like that. But to have the kitchen prepped and materials given is which is a systemic policy level, and all of it, all of those clearances have to be there for that. Unless that is there, you can't feed and you can't rotate and you can't
Yeah,
include and
yeah.
you can't do all of it, right? So the vision is, no matter what the label, no matter what the reasoning with which ministries, corporates, whether they are doing it in name of well-being, whether they are doing it in name of culture, whether they are doing it in name of blah blah blah, I don't care about the wrapper. Do it with whatever reasoning that suits you, whatever floats your boat, whatever is keeping those egos in checks and keeps the money and resources floating. I have no problem. It's consent. If we can take consent in pronouns from the community, I can take consent in what to call your business process. As simple as that. I don't have any problem by saying that, oh, you want it to be called this, I want it to be called this. I'm like, okay, two people for a vote. This is where we are. Third person, come, give me one more perspective. Let's have a vote and let's get that out of the way, because it's as simple as that. I'm not looking at it from an emotional point of view, because emotional intelligence says, and I'm learning that that is the tool that I'm launching any which way. I would rather work on EQ of people and leadership than teach them the growing binary and alphabet soup. I
Yeah.
would rather teach them respect than teach them exactly why do we have H in some places, why do we have K in some places, why do we have 2S in certain places. All right, okay, I get it that when a conversation comes to that, we'll address it. If that is not part of the FAQs, I'm not putting it up front. I'm saying first, let's arrive at your empathy quotient and your emotional quotient. How do you handle emotions at work? Are you too rigid and masculine and XYZ and whatever in those kind of senses? Is your language too violent? Is your perspective in XYZ? Are you really trying to force your way into things, or are you actually taking opinions and hearing people out and keeping the share of voice correct, just in every room, boardroom, cubicle, etc. So that's what I see fairness coming not as an afterthought or from the need to be correct, but fairness coming from the space of, hey, there is this thing available, and if we do it this way, it will also cover XYZ tick boxes and XYZ things and ESGs and blah 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 and whatever there is. Those are byproducts. So because people are thinking about things, why not think from the base and then recreate it? We are getting that opportunity next 1.5, 2 years. I think till 2027, we get to create these Lego blocks in a modular manner and reshape by the time that the tide turns. Oh, I had a different structure in mind. Would you like to revisit it? Okay. Then people come and revisit that. But you keep that on. You do that ground plinthing work, because a wrecking ball came and destroyed something doesn't mean that you stay like ruins.
Yeah, I think
You ensure the next thing is better. Yeah.
I think one of the things which I kind of draw is like DI is more of an action than that of, I would say, theory, because what you have just shared is something which is a very action oriented mindset to kind of start with, than like structural, I think, is theory. And I have also seen that in your workshop, where you basically kind of make leaders to kind of act right over there in a very very impulsive way, so that they get the idea of the inclusion in a far more wonderful way. So I'm at the last question, and I just wanted to check with you this what keeps you going as a DI leader. How do you see what is that one power or brahmastra which you are using to change and bring change within our society?
Okay, there are multiple things, because if I'm a DI person, I operate from one that goes against the grain. But one prime thing that keeps me going is understanding that consciousness judges nothing, it includes everything. And be it collective consciousness, be it super consciousness, be it whatever way, in which psychological way you're asking, spiritual way you're asking, whatever way, let people interpret it in their own way. As much as we are aware, we get to resolve our biases. And if I'm teaching unconscious biases, if I'm teaching heuristics, if I'm teaching those things, if I'm not learning from it, then it's not fair to me. It might be fair to others that they are benefiting from it. So what keeps me going is, rather, there are four elements of treating my own material, what DI material, what kind of training materials, coaching materials that I put out there in the world, from interns to CEOs, whoever be in the room.
Question: what joy can kind of bring it? What kind of joy you get being a part of the DI system, and what is the joy which you are envisioning or manifesting?
So the joy that I receive is multifold. It's from many places. It's from, seeing so much being processed and us doing so much better than the previous generation. And I think a lot of us are not grateful for the amount of change that has happened. That is something that happened. Lot of gratitude for the journey that I have had and being just alive because so many of my friends aren't. Yeah, a lot of that. And what I would like to see is people being a bit more human, knowing other humans, perceiving the humanity of others, and receiving things a bit more humanly from each other. That aspect, that every time it goes to a certain ego or a certain space, to circle back and come back and see that, hey, in there, done that, I've flawed. I've been flawed in so many things, so many places. Enough mistakes in life.
That's so beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing it. I think I also kind of resonate with the same thought which you have just shared. We should be really kind of grateful, and finding joy in what we are doing as an individual is something which is the highest way of achieving. And I think the kind of work which you have been doing with your organization, and it's a chain reaction. It's not just your organization, but you are also educating, training people across multiple other organizations, and trying to kind of dive in and shift in with the aspect of including and making access to people, especially from multiple marginalization, intersectionalities into spaces. And it's really wonderful to have you as my second guest. So I'm super thankful, and I feel a lot of happiness that I was able to kind of connect with you and have this conversation. And thank you so much for taking time and coming to this podcast within a very short, limited request time. And thank you for all the work which you have been doing as well.
But I'm so glad that you're doing this. So the pleasure is completely mine. And thanks for inviting. Thanks for doing this.